you all for joining us. Hello, my name is Elizabeth Papile. I work at a company called MAXX Potential, where I work primarily as the marketing director. I also work with our career lab, which is our hiring process. So today I'm going to host a panel with some technologists around changing careers into technology. So all of the people on today's call have worked in a previous industry, and at some point in their life and their journey decided to move into technology. So I'm going to go ahead and allow everyone to introduce themselves. If you could tell us your name, your job title, just kind of what technologies you're primarily leveraging, and then quickly what you were doing before you moved into the tech industry. So if we could start with Chazona, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chazona Baum, and I am a principal technologist for MAXX Potential. So I coordinate execution of projects that our apprentices work with. I work with a variety of technologies. Honestly, from day to day, it can be anything from spreadsheets and Zapier and Airtable to whatever a lot of our enterprise customers might be using, which oftentimes involve different kinds of database management systems and a variety of more proprietary tools.
Cool. And then real quick, Chazona, what were you doing before all of this?
So prior to this, I spent about a decade working customer service type jobs, retail and food service. Spent a couple of years in auto insurance, actually.
Cool, very cool. Thank you. Let's go up to Casey. Casey, if you could introduce us. We now know your name, but also what are you doing now, and what were you doing before technology?
Yep. Good. Hi, everyone. I'm Casey. Currently, I'm working as a ServiceNow developer. I'm at a company called Randstad and contracted out to Genworth. So ServiceNow is a platform really for IT service management. So anything from, my computer is broken, I need it fixed, I need to put in a help ticket, and the process to get that handled, to managing infrastructure and tracking servers. And ServiceNow is a pretty big platform. But I mainly work with, do a lot of JavaScript and scripting and updating records and building workflows, that sort of thing. And then before my career in tech, I was a teacher. I taught high school biology for 7.5 years, and then made the jump to the tech field.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Let's go then next to Trish.
Yeah. So I'm Trish Mahan. I'm a principal technologist at MAXX Potential. Similar to Chazona, I work with a large variety of technologies. However, most recently, I've been primarily focused around data, machine learning in both R and Python. So picking those skills up and using them in my day-to-day personal projects. Before technology, I was bartending and working in food service management for Panera Bread. So not completely unrelated, but doing all of that on the side.
Very cool. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we have Jonathon. Go ahead, Jonathon.
Hey guys, I'm Jonathon Alder. I'm currently a software engineer at RTS Labs, specifically in the front end. And so day to day I work with, in terms of languages, exclusively JavaScript. We build apps in React and React Native. Those are some of the frameworks for JavaScript for building user interfaces. And let's see, before I entered the tech field, I was just doing like odd jobs. I had no specialty. I honestly thought that enjoying and caring about my job was kind of like a fantasy that would never be realized. So it was just a mixed bag. But directly before, I was working for a wine distributor here in Richmond. So.
Cool. Thank you for joining us. So let's talk a little bit about kind of that initial spark. Chazona, could you talk a little bit about what was that, that moment of interest that thing that got you into even, you know, looking up what does technology mean? What's that thing that kind of sparked your interest?
I would say for me, it was a bit of a growth of interest over time. But I found kind of, even while I was in school, we would have, you know, computer classes that were really like a break for the teacher, and we would do whatever we wanted on the computer. It was a bit more of a wild, wild west online than it is now. I think these are back in the days of like GeoCities and Alta Vista, where it was pretty common for people to put just about anything on the internet. It didn't need to be in some social media conglomerates content feeds. And that just continued to grow through you know, the launch of MySpace and that becoming popular, being able to, you know, customize your profiles and make them really cool. I know I would get requests from people to, you know, make my profile transparent so that I can see this nifty background and other kinds of neat effects. It was easily accessible, and it was unlimited and unrestricted. And so that allowed for a lot of exploration. So I didn't think I could do anything with it at the time. So I went and I diverged into this customer service career of odd jobs. But each job that I went to, and I would get, you know, we would receive the problems that people would have, often caused by whatever our products were, which were facilitated by technology. I couldn't really impact that on my end. I just got the complaints. Every single job that I went to, I looked at, you know, I really want to go where I'm actually solving the problem. So how can I get there? So now I'm here.
Anyone else? What's that thing that got you interested in technology, that got you to kind of get a little more hands-on?
For me, my grandfather taught me how to build computers when I was a teenager. And that was a really awesome experience. And, you know, from then on, I was mainly just like using it to play video, like using the computers that I built to play video games. And, you know, I cared about the hardware up to that point, you know, would it play this or that? But then, you know, I think I was in art school and just kind of like confused what I was doing with my life. And I discovered Python and just started writing some things to solve some like basic problems, and realized that I really, really enjoyed it. So I think that was the spark for me, was first off, you know, like learning about hardware when I was younger, but then later on just kind of being curious and like finding Python. I think it was after like I installed Linux on one of my machines because I was like too broke to afford a new copy of Windows. So yeah, I don't know, just kind of random.
Cool. Anyone else? I want to give you guys all a chance to talk about that initial interest.
Yeah, I'll say for me, growing up, the idea of like coding and programming always interested me. I just never did it. I always thought like, oh, you need to be really good at math in order to work with computers and technology. I remember like Jonathan, you mentioned Python. I remember once in high school, like downloading a Python compiler onto my computer and thinking I could go in and be like, hack the mainframe. Like, obviously that's not how it works. But so anyway, yeah, but then I went into teaching, and honestly, I was just so kind of looking for something else to do. And then when I met my now wife, and she is a front-end web developer, and then that's when I really kind of clicked into you don't need to be a math genius in order to get a career in technology. And to see what she was doing with especially front-end web developer, that's really what got me interested in making the jump, is to become a front-end web developer. And since I've got another route, which is great, but I think, yeah, just seeing that in person and seeing somebody who actually does that on a day-to-day basis and how much she enjoyed her job and her career, and that it's accessible. You know, you don't need to do a degree and to be this, you know, MIT grad in order to make the jump.
Yeah, I can say I also sort of was always encouraged growing up to get into technology. So from getting little website builder software packages when I was younger to Then exploring this, similar to Chazona, the MySpace theming, being able to make a pretty cool MySpace custom background. In high school, I took several technology related courses where I ended up being sort of the website support agent for a research and technology class. Outside of that, I was just always tinkering with it. So I loved, I remember building this cool little remote from scratch that would control my TV, and I just love tinkering. So I got into it for that.
Awesome. So can you all talk about really that, like, tinkering, you know, what is this thing I'm gonna change my MySpace profile, or I like building, you know, working with hardware and really seeing the guts of the computer. Going from that to, oh my gosh, I could actually, you know, have this be a job or a career or something where I can kind of sustain myself off of. Can you speak a little bit to what that transition looked like?
Yeah, so I can say for me, it was a lot of self-reflection. So I was looking a lot at what I was doing with my free time, and that if I was doing so much tinkering and so much with technology in my free time, I was willing to do this work for free. So why not try to make that a career? Like when I was in college, I was partitioning my drive so that I could dual boot Linux and Windows, and you know, if I was already doing some of these tech skills in my free time, why not try to make a career out of that? Because I love doing it, and then work never feels like work. Was sort of my thoughts.
Yeah, I would kind of piggyback on Trish there, and definitely agree. It really, a lot of it came down to the kinds of things that I would normally be doing for fun, and getting to see actually there were people that were out there doing these things and getting paid for it. And a lot of times using the same kinds of skill sets that I was using anytime that I had a spare moment to go build something on the side. Also, having been basically my family's tech support for about 15 years prior to, I'd kind of had experiences that made me realize that maybe not everybody was capable of doing some of these things that for me were feeling like they were natural. Like, to me, it was just like, well, anybody can go build this web page. It's not a big deal. But I'd also, around the time when I was, like Trish, dual booting with Linux, I figured, well, why can't I get my family running Linux on their machines? That would be so much better. And realized that was a terrible idea. Since I had to now help them with every single problem they had, or when they broke things that they shouldn't have had access to in the first place. So really just kind of recognizing some of those things, that there was something different, and that there were career opportunities for doing something that was genuine fun. It's like if you can align your interests with what creates value for people, that always feels like a win-win to me.
Yeah, and hot tip for anyone out there who is currently the tech support for their family: install remote access software on your computers, and that way you can fix these things before Christmas and you don't have a ticket backlog waiting for you when you get home. So, but yeah, like, I don't know. I don't feel like I don't feel like I, from an early point, realized that I could do something with what I was tinkering with. I think it's the same kind of story. It's like, I was doing this for fun. And I think before I knew that it was going to be viable for me as a career, I kind of felt that it was right for me. It's like it kind of went backwards. It's like I wasn't researching careers. I just messed around with some Python and wrote some little scripts and stuff like that, and just had a good time doing it, and did it in my free time when I got home from whatever job I was working at the time. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, it just felt kind of like natural to me.
I'll go real quick too. I guess for me, again, I never really did this as a hobby growing up or anything. It was more so, for me, it was more so I wanted to get out of my current job, and I knew that this was a growing career path. And so that was really the drive for me is I wanted to make the switch. I knew so I looked for technologies that I knew I could find a career with, again, being more web development based. And so that's what kind of drove me was I want a new job and this really interests me. So I'm going to start learning how to do it.
Cool. So, so some of the folks who have joined us this afternoon in the audience might also be feeling the same thing of, I've discovered this kind of spark. I think this is interesting. I'm poking at this, I'm doing that. And there is, I think as time has gone on, there's a wealth of resources out there, from tutorials to different courses, things like that. Could you speak to a little bit about kind of what you were building? So beyond, the question that I see as someone who speaks to a lot of prospective technologists is, what tutorial do I take? What's the right language? What technology should I go and learn? Could you speak to how you kind of navigated that? And if that's how you approached it even.
I can kind of jump in here. If it helps, for me personally, I didn't necessarily approach it from the perspective of what tutorial should I be taking, what class should I be taking necessarily. I kind of, because I like to build things and I like to tinker, like my perspective was a little bit more about, okay, so if I want to build X thing, what do I need in order to build it? So that influenced, like, most of my initial work that I would do was geared around building actual projects out. So even early on, my sister was expecting my niece and we didn't have a lot of notice. So she needed things like a website to invite people to her baby shower, which needed some MailChimp integration and links to her baby registry. So it was like, okay, how do I create a one-page website that will allow me to do these things, and then go find the resources that allow me to do it. And for me, I feel like taking that approach, made it a lot simpler to cut through kind of the endless resources that were out there, because then I could target my searches more specifically to what I was looking to accomplish. And then also meant that it stuck better because there was literally no way for me taking individual projects that I actually cared about, to find a tutorial that covered start to finish exactly what I was looking to build. Like, that wasn't going to happen. So I wasn't going to find something out there that was going to hold my hand every step of the way.
Yeah, I would echo some of that sentiment, that I often am only using tutorials when there's something very specific task level that I don't know how to do. And to put it into perspective from another industry, like if I want to change the oil on my car or the oil filter on my car, I'm going to look up specifically a tutorial that teaches you how to do that. In technology, I don't think it's very different. If I want to know how to make a list view in a mobile app, I'm going to look for a tutorial that teaches me exactly that thing that I'm trying to do. So I think keeping it specific, task oriented in how you're using tutorials is very valuable, and keeps your tutorial time limited, but you're progressing your skills by continuing to build these projects.
Yeah, I think I took kind of an unconventional approach here. First of all, like, I have a severe lack of creativity. So like, choosing a project to build was before I knew how to write code, it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. And I don't even think I successfully did it, chose anything to build. So instead, I went on and I found OpenCourseWare from MIT. There was a CS 101 course on there. So I took more of an academic approach, as opposed to kind of, let's build this thing and learn while we're building it. So up until I started working at MAXX Potential, I really didn't have a whole lot of I couldn't really conceptualize, an entire app coming together as a whole. Like I knew how to write, a lot of things in Python, and like a lot of the ins and outs of the language and stuff like that. It's like, didn't really understand where to apply it. So I think that's something you don't hear very often. I think when I learned, like the Medium tutorials and a lot of the tutorials you see today, like weren't as prevalent as they are now. But yeah, that CS101 course was helpful. I don't use a lot of the knowledge that I learned from it day to day. But at the same time, it kind of helped me get in the mindset of what the code I'm doing is actually doing behind the scenes. So.
I think I saw very similar, I think, to kind of the route you took, Jonathan, is I think I did what a lot of people do when they decide they want to learn how to code, is go to Google and type in what language should I learn. And I pretty much, you're always going to find Python, I feel like, is typically the Python's the used language. So I started with Python. I did Codecademy for a while, and Codecademy is okay. It's a good, I think, to kind of dip your toe in and kind of, if you've never programmed or coded or anything, to get sort of the basics down. And I did the MIT open course as well, part of it at least. Felt too much like I was sitting in school again. But anyway, and then I think the biggest thing for me that helped was Udemy. And Udemy is, you do have to pay, but it's usually like $10 a class. But that, I think really it was like a full stack web development course on there. I don't know if I ever actually ended up finishing that entire thing, but just the instructor was very good and very in depth, and this made it a lot easier than. I'm not trying to put Codecademy down, but I just felt like Udemy was much more hands-on, and then that gave me the projects to start to build on. I know when I did like my interview at MAXX, I showed a project that I'd been working on through Udemy. And then obviously progressed from there. But again, I think, and then the biggest thing for me too was then once I started working at MAXX and getting then the actual hands-on real life work, definitely, and helped me the biggest. Probably the most, I should say.
Cool, thank you. Can you all speak to that a little bit? So that sort of connection, whether you made it through entering into the industry of technology. So both Jonathon and Casey no longer work at MAXX Potential. They have since moved on into their careers, but did work previously. Sort of that connection between Python is a great example, because that's the one that always comes up if I were to Google what should I learn, or sorry, what are the top languages. Python is one, and there's awesome tutorials, and they're tons of fun to go and write scripts and things like that. But where you made that connection between, oh, I'm learning this language and syntax, and then what is it actually doing? I think people sometimes go down the tutorial path, which is great and it's fun to do, but can you speak a little bit to the sort of behind the scenes connection of what you're actually building or trying to build?
I think for me, again, the main language now that I work with is JavaScript. And especially back when I was really focusing more on web development, of finally making the connection of, like, I went into it thinking like, oh, website, like everything on there is somebody going in and typing in like the concept of a dynamic web page just didn't click for me until I started to really dig into JavaScript and see like, oh, this is coming from a database, or this is what's happening when a user's inputting and hitting submit. Well, it's taking that and storing it somewhere, and then using JavaScript or whatever to pull that in. So I think building it and really focus on building like a complete website from the front end to the back end, and getting into the database a little bit, and sort of having to make those connections myself. But I think for me, just focusing in on that one language with JavaScript definitely helped me sort of make those connections. And then I can branch out now and see like, okay, if you're using Python, this is how it's going to work, or if you're using Java or whatever. But so I think, again, just getting that more hands-on, actually building stuff, and not just following a tutorial and then saying, okay, I'm done, and moving on.
Yeah, I would agree with Casey there, especially like when you're building something and not just following a tutorial, things aren't necessarily always going to work right out of the box. Things are going to break and mess up. and you're going to mistype something, and it's going to force you to go back and figure out, why is this not working? And I feel like every one of those was way more valuable learning experience than any one nugget that, a teacher could teach me. It also is something that I feel like going into choosing your resources, like with a mindset of, I want to pick things that are going to be teaching me not just like what I'm doing, but like why it's important that it's done this way, or why it might be this way versus something else, is helpful. So like for me, if I'm trying to encourage someone to go learn about, basic web development, HTML, CSS things, I might encourage them to go check out the Mozilla Developer Network, not W3 Schools, for example, because it'll give you more of a sense of like, what are the best practices and why are they like that? So like, you can totally go and do it a different way, but it's kind of like art. You need to know the rules before you can break them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I can echo that. Like I feel like that's when you reach a new level of comfort, when you get to a point where, you're not going to Stack Overflow every time, but instead you're going to NDN. Or I know one of our previous fellow apprentices at MAXX used to go to the ECMAScripts standard, like bypass MDN and go straight to the standard, which I thought was interesting. But I mean, it's like, once you start to get past kind of the basic questions on how to do things and start to piece together things in your head, and like Casey said, getting in there, and especially with JavaScript, because it's the language of the web, you can write front end, back end code, you can write database code, it can really do a lot of things. And I think that's a really good language to kind of understand what's going on, just by, looking up how a web application works and then just dialing into each little aspect of it. And with JavaScript, there's so many third-party libraries that you don't really have to focus in on exactly how it's working. You can just set it up and see, like make these pieces communicate. And then when you feel more comfortable, you can kind of like stop using that third-party library and set it up manually yourself. Just as kind of like an academic effort. Day-to-day JavaScript front-end development, we use third-party libraries all the time because nobody has time to build it from scratch. So there are a lot of things, that I don't know how to do in vanilla JS, but I know that this one library will do it for me. So yeah, I don't know. That's a good way to kind of learn how things work. It's just deconstruct them into like an axiomatic level.
Cool. I'm seeing a question from some of the attendees. Can you speak to some of the projects that you worked on to learn these things? So a little more specifically, what was kind of the project itself, whether it is a personal project, in the case of Chazona, making a website for your sister's baby shower. That's a great example of a personal project that you could work on. But anything that you all can talk about where you were trying to kind of accomplish a task, add value.
I'll go first. I think for me, so when I was at MAXX Potential and going through the level up process to when I decided to make the jump to level 4, it's kind of like the final, you're ready to go begin your career sort of thing. John DeLuca had me build it's a site that uses the Dark Sky Weather API to take weather information and then display it, on a web page. And then specifically to use a caching application to where you don't have to hit the API every time. So it had like a timer. So every, if you looked up the weather for a location, and then if you did it again within like 10 minutes, it would just pull it from the cache instead of hitting the API again, because a lot of APIs either have limits or it's just going to make the process slower. But I think having to do that, and that was a full stack. I had to make the front end. Ended up using React for that. So that really I'd done some React tutorials in the past. So that was really getting my hands on React and having to fully understand what I was doing with it. Using the caching API or the caching library, which I had never used before, and kind of understanding how that worked. So I had to do that. And then in one of the one of the repeat interviews I did for that process, he basically said, okay, now let's say there's no more caching application and you need to actually just store all this in a database. So then I had to go through on the spot and put together a MySQL database and make those connections. So, which I've worked on other personal projects in the past, was able to pull all of that together. But again, I think just building that entire application, it was frustrating at times. Had to repeat the process a couple of times, but in the end, I learned so much from it. I don't know if I'll ever use React again in my career. I don't know, but I've got that kind of under my belt and could understand the basic React application if you showed it to me, and understand the caching system and how that worked and everything. So it was just a good, big project that I think really helped me.
I think while I was at MAXX, the largest personal project that I had was just trying to recreate Twitter, like doing a Twitter clone, which seems simple. I don't personally use Twitter, but from from the outside, it looks like it would be simple to build, right? Because it's just tweets and users and things like that. It's a typical what they call CRUD setup, create, read, update, delete, with user access and things like that. But I quickly realized that it was a lot more to it than I thought. But I mean, I think that was still a really great way to also learn how things work. Is just like find an app that you like, or a popular app, and then just reverse engineer it. And that is, I don't mean fully, I mean just like basic operations, right? Because Twitter's got load balancing and just all sorts of stuff that you won't necessarily get into until you're much further along in your career. Yeah, like I think that recreating Twitter, or at least trying to, definitely helped me understand things a little bit better.
Yeah, I would agree that like taking a look at existing things that are out there and looking at how they're made, and how you might recreate something is really helpful. For me, I might just add, if you have some kind of personal connection to it in some kind of way, that can help one to just like keep the motivation up as well. When things are frustrating and things don't work, because that will happen. You're gonna bang your head against the wall and be like, why is this not working? And maybe I'm dumb. And like that's a normal part of the process. So like for me, like one of the things I was doing around that time frame where I was trying to jump from, okay, I can make a basic web page, to let me try to do more complex stuff, was literally people have things they need to be able to share. And right now, the main ways they share them are through, big companies that other people control their content. So my sister needed to be able to share photos of her baby. So I ended up basically recreating a social media site for her to share her pictures with her baby, but that way it would be invite only and Facebook wouldn't have access to the pictures. And so it's like taking a look at things that are already out there and learning how might I actually build that, but still having some kind of personal connection or interest in it for some reason. Whether it's like, this is going to be helping me personally, maybe this is something that'll help me get my grocery shopping done faster, or this will help me with this boring task that I have to do all the time that I hate, or this will help like a family member that I care about. I can't tell you how many times I've made like a really simple game for my kids because it would keep them occupied. And if they were happy, then I'm happy.
Yeah, for me, I would say it's also almost always about the personal connection to the project. So when I was in school and taking tech classes at NC State, I was taking Fortran classes and then using Fortran by night to automate my scheduling for the next semester, because I am very particular about my class schedule. I was working full-time and used my Fortran skills, or newly acquired Fortran skills, to build that for myself. During the apprenticeship program, I was building a specific mobile app during the day for work. So then I ended up building a mobile app for home called, I called it Honeydew, like the melon, but it was really the honey clean out the gutters, honey, we're out of milk, honeydew list app. but it was building another mobile app that would help build my mobile app dev skills, iOS, Objective-C, at home, so that I would be more proficient at work. I always relate sort of anything I'm trying to build my skills into a personal project that I'm encouraged to get done, usually because I'm trying to automate my life. So I would like to make my life as easy as possible, whether that be the lights, building a virtual assistant for myself to do the lights, the fan, the security network traffic checking, building a virtual assistant to be able to track me, because I'm terrible at answering my phone and it drives my wife crazy. So that way she can just say, you know, Dumbledore, where's my wife, and find me. But they're always personally influenced, encouraged to get done type of projects.
Awesome, thank you. Trish, I'll trade you some branding for that Honeydew app for some equity in the app. That sounds like a good useful app.
Yeah, it's super useful. It's connected to Airtable now too, so I continue to improve it.
I understand Airtable. I understand how to use it. I do see, there is something I wanted to hit on, which you all brought up, which I hear time and time again, is really finding that sort of passion project, that thing you're interested in, that thing, whether it's going to automate your life or help your family member, or you're just curious and think Twitter is easy to build, and it's not. But the other thing that you hit upon, which is important to keep in mind, is that all of these projects at some point get hard or frustrating, or you hit a wall. And so that curiosity and that passion is what's going to help you sort of climb over that wall when seeing something all the way through to the end. So just wanted to make mention of that. I do see a couple questions here in the chat that I want to address. Jonathan Roth brought up React. So he said, do you see a lot of first tech job React developer career opportunities? So career opportunities around early sort of technology. Do you see any sort of React opportunities, any of you?
Yeah, I interview people at RTS that came from the U of R bootcamp a lot. We've also got a couple of MAXX Potential, former apprentices at MAXX that work at RTS as well. Yeah, like we hire a lot of first tech job React positions, yeah, I think that we see a lot of that.
I would say for sure. So I help organize the RVA JS conference here in Richmond this year. We're actually partnering with RVA Tech because we've sold out every year with companies looking for tech talent. So it's super popular, super in demand.
As I say, actually, before I got my position right now, a couple months ago, I got contacted by a recruiter that was looking for, it was like a contract React position. And I think I've done React. I had it on my LinkedIn profile, and I think that was enough just to even get a hit from a recruiter of looking for a junior React developer. And it's going to go through that process and then ended up finding something else before that completed. But there are definitely jobs out there.
Very cool. There is a question in here from Charles Smith, which is, how did you get your first IT job when you had zero experience? To kind of start to answer that, I think a lot of what they all just talked about, all those personal projects and kind of that, taking that initial idea of tinkering of oh, this is interesting, this might be cool, not necessarily thinking about it as a career path, to building something personal or just wanting to see how something works. To that, I would add, is there anything that you think you did differently? So if we were to step outside of projects and tutorials, what else did you do that helped you further along in your career technology career?
I went to a few meetups. I didn't go to a whole lot. I'm kind of an introvert, so I didn't really make any networking connections, but I did get to kind of immerse myself in the community by listening to talks that I did not understand at all. But then I would take things that I didn't know, and then from those meetups and from what people were saying, and go home and research those, and just kind of get a feel for what the Richmond tech scene in particular was all about.
Yeah, I would kind of double down with Jonathan there on the meetups. I know I'm definitely more of an introvert myself as well, but initially I went with trying to just go the project route and just the project route, and built a whole lot of things that got increasingly more complex and bigger and more demonstrative. But I ended up still trying to apply to companies through like the front door route for every job that I went for. And after about 100 of them and not coming away with a job, I realized this wasn't working. So I ended up, rather than just getting completely discouraged and leaving the fight, I started going to a whole lot of local meetups. I initially cast a pretty wide net, going to just about anything that I had some kind of shared interest in. There were things from front-end development and JavaScript to IoT and robotics and AR meetups. There were women who code and other kinds of meetups that I went to. In fact, I found out about MAXX initially through a Women Who Code meetup. I wouldn't have even known about it if I hadn't gone to some of the meetups. And because I went to some of these, got a sense for which ones were ones that impacted me, that I could have an impact on, that allowed me to really build solid relationships with other people who were doing the thing that I wanted to do already. That's been one of the biggest factors for me in terms of like really helping out my own career growth, as well as being another opportunity to get, a soundboard from, what are best practices in this area, or do I need a certification in this to go for this company?
Cool, thank you. Trish or Casey, I do want to allow you the opportunity if you have anything to add to that. I know meetups and different technology groups, so things like Women Who Code here in Richmond, and there's a couple other different groups out there. I almost always hear that from people who are working in technology, whether they are new or have been in their career for a while. Having resources out there is great, but also kind of having that sounding board, that other person to interact with can help your development. I will say, obviously right now we are in a remote environment, but a lot of the meetups I've noticed are still happening virtually. So I would encourage anyone who's interested, and there are all types of groups out there to very specific languages or technologies, to like vintage Nintendo games, things like that. There's a bunch of different meetups, and so it's meetup.com, and a lot of them are still happening just in the remote virtual environment.
And even with that, I know it can be a little awkward to be on a Zoom meeting with strangers sometimes, but most of these meetup groups are also affiliated with like a Slack group that you can participate via IM as well. So I know the Norfolk area where I'm at has one. Richmond has our VA Dev. If you can get involved with one of those Slack-based groups, that can also be a good way to kind of introduce yourself, get in touch with other people who have similar interests as you, and start building some of those relationships.
Thank you. So we are at 12:45. We've been kind of taking questions. I do want to open up to the attendees. I have the Q&A up and the chat up. If anyone has any specific questions, while we have some technologists here, please feel free to type them. I'll give a minute or two for that. While I'm waiting on that, Chazona, you actually brought something up, a term, which is certs or certifications. That's another question that I almost always get from people looking to make the jump into technology. Can you speak to kind of certifications, what to get, when to get them, why to get them, should you get them?
I mean, personally, for me, I'm a little bit on the if it's going to help you side of things. Sometimes the courses that might go hand in hand with the certifications can be fairly instructive, or the projects that you might build while you're going for them can be instructive. Getting a certification is not going to get you through a technical interview. That it just won't. So I'm a little bit more on the side of, if it'll get you in the door, then by all means go get it. If your company will pay for it, then by all means go get it. But for me, I would also generally, I would introduce the networking aspect, because I wouldn't go try to approach, a whole bunch of different companies and apply that way. I've tried it. I failed at it. If you want to get really, have a really unpleasant experience, go try that. But I would go do the networking thing while you're building the tech skill, so that you can ask people like, hey, do I need this even to get in the door or not? They'll usually tell you, be pretty honest. And sometimes those connections can help you to get at least into an interview. If you would otherwise have to have like a degree or a cert to kind of pass the first round of screening, but they otherwise wouldn't have cared.
Yeah, I would say definitely if it's a position that's gonna it's gonna be on the the job description requires X certification. I have 0 certifications other than going through the MAXX program. I guess it counts as any kind of a certification, but I think now though that I've officially kind of started my career with ServiceNow, there is definitely the ServiceNow development program, and there's a whole list of certifications you can get. So I think if long term this is what I decide to stick with, I'll definitely start to pursue some of those just to help my own career now that I've kind of in the door. But again, I think I got hired doing ServiceNow with 0 certifications. I think just the fact that the project that I was on, I just kind of rolled off onto this from the project to a full-time position, just demonstrating that I could do the work that they were asking. There wasn't any kind of, well, you don't have this certification, so we're not gonna, we don't want you. But yeah, I think, like Chazona said, it's more so certification is going to be to get your foot in the door if it's a position that really absolutely requires it. But I think for a lot of, especially like more web development based stuff, you're not going to run into, you don't have the certification, so we're not going to even consider you.
And in that case, honestly, sometimes like the tech has changed before they could actually update a cert. So it's almost impossible to get a certification that wouldn't be massively outdated.
I will say there are some jobs that do certainly require the cert path, and I'm not opposed to the cert path. I think it has a good purpose. Certifications really structure your learning to make sure that you're hitting on multiple concepts. For a tinkerer like myself, that's not for me. Like I mentioned, I'm gonna dig up how do I break this? How do I fix this? How do I do this one specific thing? So those sort of structured learning courses just aren't how I learn best. But that they are useful for anyone struggling to figure out a path for themselves. But I do agree with Chazona that they more get you in the door for that interview, not necessarily through the interview.
Yeah, and there are certain certifications that can get you jobs, such as like AWS certifications. If you wanted to go into DevOps, you can look into AWS certifications, kind of move your way up that chain, and that will result in a job. They cost money, obviously, but and I don't believe the top tier are very cheap, but at the same time, it's a good way to show a company that you know what you're talking about when it comes to server infrastructure. Same thing with companies or technologies like Salesforce. They have a lot of certifications that kind of tells the employer that you know what you're doing. If you're going to be working specifically with something like Salesforce or with something like AWS. But I can say, as an interviewer for JavaScript positions, I haven't considered any certifications in terms of do I or do I not hire this person.
Cool, thank you. We do have a question in here. What does your company look for? So I'll ask, I'll start with Jonathon. Instead of, well, you said you do interviews for your company. What are some things that either you think RTS was looking for when they hired you, or that you know are of value to getting a job at RTS?
So I can say that RTS definitely values kind of culture fit, if you will. We're looking for people who are open to learn. I think that's can be said about many tech companies that are hiring developers. People who don't take the knowledge that they have as fact always, like they're always ready to learn more or to restructure, refactor the knowledge that they have in order to be better developers. We look for flexible people and just, I don't know. Yeah, that's the culture part aspect. In terms of programming, personally, I look for, say, I hire a lot. I mean, I interview a lot of React developers, potential React developers. And what I look for usually is someone who understands that React is like a framework in JavaScript. React isn't its own language. So someone who has kind of taken apart what they've learned instead of just following a tutorial, taking it apart and just kind of understanding at face value what's going on. Of course, as a junior developer, you're not going to have all the answers. But, like someone who understands that, yeah, JavaScript, React is a JavaScript framework and that it's not its own language. That's one of the common things, which it might seem like an easy thing to answer, but there are a lot of developers who learned React before learning JavaScript, which is not a bad thing. It's just that you need to take that next step and learn, what is sitting beneath React.
Cool. Casey, could you tell us what you think your position was looking for? What is it that you had that they needed or wanted?
Yeah, I think just the ability to learn, honestly. When I started, so the position I am in now, it resulted from the placement I was on at my last placement at MAXX Potential. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door. Before this, I had no clue what ServiceNow was, other than I think at another MAXX position using it as a user as a ticketing system. So being able to go from zero knowledge and just pick things up quickly and ask the right questions and understand what was being asked of me, and to be able to follow through with this task, even if I ran into issues, but still be like, hey, I'm not quite understanding this, and then having it explained to me, and then being able to then do it right the next time. So I think being able to learn is definitely the biggest thing. And then obviously being able to fit into the company as well, to be professional and work in an office setting and interact with people from other teams and not make people mad and not want to interact with our team anymore. So yeah, I think being able to learn and the willingness to learn too is definitely the biggest thing.
Great, thank you. And Trish and Chazona, you are at the same company that I am also at. So not to be redundant, but I mean, what we're looking for in our prospective technologists is exactly what Jonathon and Casey said, which is really that willingness to learn. in that sort of growth mindset. I've seen a lot of just stuff out there around growth mindset, and there are tons of resources from people much smarter than myself, but that it's really that ability to continue to learn, that understanding that you're not going to have all the answers, but you're really willing to go out there and try to find the best answers. But with that, Trish and Chazona, I do want to allow you anything to add to that, as you all really are technologists. What are you looking for?
I think I look a lot for passion and commitment to this industry, and like the decision to get into tech to have already been made. So I ask myself a lot when it comes to the decision time, if we say no to this candidate, are they going to prove us wrong? Or are they going to do this with or without us? If I do believe that they want to do this without us, after receiving a rejection from us, I want to be a part of that path and, help you out and make your life a little easier. So, but a lot of that comes down to that passion and commitment to getting into this field.
Yeah, I think otherwise we've largely covered a lot of it, even between some of the conversations we've had about how we even got started in the first place. I think for a lot of folks that are getting involved with tech, it's going to be something where you're going to have some of that natural curiosity to see how things work under the hood. If you're sticking with it, you're going to have run into those kind of walls at some point. Are you able to keep working past them and to get past those walls, or do they stop you? A lot of those kinds of things are things that we look at.
I had one last general thing to add. Everybody hates live coding challenges. If you forget everything that you know during a live coding challenge, so did everyone else. They're tough. So yeah, if you feel nervous about a live coding challenge, it's completely normal and during the interview process, and you're going to mess up no matter how well you know everything. So I just wanted to add that in there. It's cool, it happens. So
yeah, just talk through your process with your interviewer, please. Don't give them just nothing to work with. It's terrible to watch someone go through that, but you can't actually help them because they're giving you nothing.
Thank you. And with that, because we are coming up at 1 p.m., so Jonathon, thank you for the little nugget. Anyone else, Casey, Trish, or Chazona, any little last pieces of wisdom to leave folks with this afternoon?
For me, I'll say just keep an open mind and be willing to learn new things and learn new technologies. Like I said, I came in to the IT career thinking front-end web developer. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I want nothing else. That's all I want to do. To then I was like, oh, the backend's kind of cool. Let me learn more about that. To now I'm a ServiceNow developer, which again, in November I had no clue what it was, and now it's my career. So I think again, keep an open mind. I'm not saying don't follow your passions, but something else might pop up that really interests you, and it might lead to a career.
Yeah, I would piggyback off of Casey and just reminding that there are so many different IT tech related career paths that are out there that you might not have any idea about. If what you're really interested in is solving problems and making or fixing things or breaking them, if that's what you're into, just keeping that open mind and being mindful of supply and demand is something that I would definitely be mindful of. So if everyone is talking about free code camp and developers and development, and that's what you're hearing about over and over again, be mindful that the supply of developers is probably going to be higher than the supply of IT professionals in fields that they're not actively talking about. So you might have an easier opportunity getting your foot in the door in IT support or QA or things like robotic process automation or ServiceNow, things that you might not have ever heard of even.
When I was in school, I got a great piece of advice from a mentor of mine that the job you will be working in 10 years probably doesn't exist yet. So continue just growing in whatever direction your path takes you. As long as you're consistently growing, you'll be able to achieve that future job. And even though I was in sociology, it was completely unrelated. I've never found that more true. As the technology industry is consistently changing, there's always new technologies being created, new languages. So I think that was some of the best advice I think I've ever received.
Yeah, and finally, the barrier to entry is much lower than you think. It takes effort, but just keep trying, you know.
Well, thank you all so much for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us. So thank you, Casey, Jonathon, Trish, and Chazona. And then, of course, thank you so much to RVA Tech for having us this afternoon. We really appreciate the time and the opportunity to speak with folks looking to get into the tech industry. And then, of course, to the attendees, thank you for joining us. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you all soon.